podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead Podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you can please do that before we get into the show, I would much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. Peace. I'm Majestic.
My brother, Justice Rajee.
All right. So here we are once again, same as it ever was, or something like that.
Same as it ever was.
So to get started this week, I'll enter in on a column you shared with me. For those that don't know, to at least to nobody black that pays attention, surprise, the Trump administration has started a effort to attack the Smithsonian as a whole, but specifically attack the African American History Museum. And there's been efforts to, I don't know how detailed on the internal things, but I've heard folks say that they've tried to change some exhibits already. I don't know that to be true, actually. We do know that the director who was in charge at the start of the year has exited, under the, realization that what these folks are, probably asking that director to do. But the general threat that we've experienced is that the primary, one of the easy ways that they've decided to demonstrate an anti-DEI perspective has been to attack black things and black people and black information and black history. And so a really good column by James McWhorter? John McWhorter, columnist at the New York Times. And also I think he teaches at Rutgers.
He was at the Manhattan Institute.
Yeah.
City Institute. He's done the range of the conservative.
Yeah, well, they're like a black conservative, like intellectual, I think.
Yeah.
At least more conservative than not.
Yeah.
In terms of scholars and intellect, in that capacity. And he wrote a really good piece though about the museum and about this moment and what's happening with it, with some overlaps. I think tapped into some other things that I wanted to chop it up with you about, because I think there's a lot there, especially in this moment when folks are maybe engaging in some form of like, well, they're trying to erase black history, and then I need to do this, I need to do that, or I need to say this, I need to say that. I think there's some good footing in the brother's piece around how we think about history in a larger sense, but also what's happening in the moment. So I wanted to open up, chopping it up about that. So I'll bounce past to you. What's some of your first thoughts about that?
So I've been someone to kind of following McWhorter since his perspective on Ebonics. And obviously that was a whole different conversation based on whole different premises of kind of, if I wanted to be overly simplistic, getting people where they're at versus what they should be striving for and all that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I think starting there and then getting all the way to where he is now, where like you said, I think some of the challenge around black intellectual thought has been are you conservative or liberal?
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you're black, you can have a range of perspectives. Some of them can be conservative, some of them can be liberal, right? And I think we have done ourselves a disservice with this framing.
Mm-hmm.
That means that a conservative will always vote for a Republican, or that a liberal will always vote for a Democrat, right? And so we put ourselves in these boxes that neatly fit voting records in power, but don't fit people. And I think, to your point, I think he was nuanced in his perspective. Essentially saying okay, in his vantage point, there's been some overreach around certain things. And I think his thing of rooting, are black people all about struggle, right? And is the black experience in America all about struggle? And I think his conversation is like, okay, there can be various ways of seeing it, but what's happening to the National African American History Museum is just giving it a bad rap. Like it's being wrapped up in stuff that's about something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's like this continuous idea of where do we put our history? And is our history always a sidecar to someone else's reality?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? And as Black folks, how are we thinking about our history and how is it connected to a fundamentally American experience and a global experience, right? When we talk about that tome that we're both still trying to get through, American Fathers, like, you know what I mean? Like, just about like, fundamentally the Black experience in America is an American experience. And that's not me waving a flag or thinking I'm Herman Cain, right?
Right.
Fundamentally an American experience because we've been here hundreds of years.
Yeah. Well, it's as a degree holding historian by, at least by my undergraduate degree.
Right on.
I've always like been fascinated by people's actual full not understanding of the actual discipline of history, right? Because folks, and some of that, like, I'm not surprised, but fascinated in that. Yes, sometimes our learning experience with history will be, remember dates, remember certain things, remember certain ideas, remember certain people, and they're important because. But the experiential thing I tend to find with folks, like if they, I'm a so-and-so history buff. So you get into, maybe it's art history, or maybe it's I'm always fascinated by World War II. So I've read all these books about World War II and the generation and the thing and this and that and the battles, or whatever nuance within the study of the subject matters that someone anchors on or hooks on, but that the actual part of, and that's not a bad thing. That's a part of even the way you're trained, at least at the time when I, completed my degree, is that studying sources of information, primary sources, connecting then with secondary sources, and then figuring out what is there a topic or a subject, because there's an acknowledgement that there's so much to know that there's no easy way to talk about all of this. And if you try to sum up actual history and a couple of these are the most important things and the other things are not important, it's like, well, I mean, that's germane to the circumstance of the people that you talk about in the moment and what they want. And coming out of our shared, I think, experience as young folks, where the almost, I would say, I would think of it almost like the most abundant access to historical knowledge as it pertains to our community, I think was experienced sort of somewhere in between, maybe a little older than us and then maybe a little younger than us, in terms of where you had not just the, those academics and scholars who had struggled and fought to get things into the canon, so to speak, or fought all these battles to go you're gonna stop saying that we have no history and all these sort of stuff, to then the activist and the community organizing, so to speak, aspect, where in public history are you need to know about this neighborhood and where we came from and brother, and Egypt, these people was black, they would have looked like us, these sort of all that sort of, where there was this I think, and I guess something, if I justice becomes academic, maybe I'll go and would something I would want to study is the impact of being in this age where we were bridging several generations of scholarly folks who fought through, in terms of black folks, and then also scholars who were maybe not necessarily black, but who went nah, man, the actual data says these things about these points in history, or this community, or that's the framing of this as white or black or whatever is actually not the language that the people you're talking about would have talked about themselves. So it's actually incorrect for us to be talking about them in that context. That only serves us, and all these other things that had not, if you read a book from the turn of the century, is not the way it would frame that conversation. But then also that a part of the sort of, especially if you were feelings, however you felt about your experience in the American project, to go man, I need something different. I'm fighting back. So getting into studying, getting into reading nonfiction works and stories was a part of also the like, I'm taking, this like a real assertive taking your education into your own hand about yourself. So when you go to this moment and the people, do these, we love in this society to do this. Well, like I'm going to say, well, if it was really American history, you just would learn about America. If it was really this, you don't need to talk about the race. And we say that too. Like the argument says that too. Like it's not just white folks, it's other folks that it's like, this urge to then like, well, why would African Americans history on the National Mall? Why is it reasonable to have a standout museum to speak to their experience in history? And, I can give a long speech, but the simple one is because if you just leave it to the other museums, like the National Museum of Natural History or these other things, you could lose some contextual reality. Right. There's a very specific thing. And if somebody actually goes to the museum, which is what I appreciated about the pieces, he was like, well, I realized I had never actually been to the museum. Right. And I've been, how many times have I been? I've been several times. I've made it when I've had work stuff or something else that has brought me to DC. I've made it like, I'm going to go over to the museum again, because structurally, I think it does a really good job of, and even physically, the way it's laid out, and he speaks to it in the piece. When you start in the depths and the bottom, it takes you through, gives you a grounding in the experience of the slave trade and the Maafa and like what that meant. But then takes you on a progressive trip, to the present. And yes, speaks to the where we have a special place in the American story. And it's a story that if you want to understand, if you want to do a 20-minute, if you want to be like, I'm so into Declaration of Independence and how profound it was and changing the world and the declaratory documents about human rights, you can't have that conversation without some point going, how did the people who wrote this at the same time literally go home and have someone in subjugation make their food? You can't intellectually, right. You can't tell me you think about this and not have to deal with, wait, how do I make sense of that? Like what was happening?
You can't tell the whole story. I mean, it's very similar to like, yes, the American project includes airplanes, but we still need a time to just talk about airplanes. Because in the American project, if you only gave time to talk about airplanes, like if you just said, oh, airplane history is American history, you ain't gonna talk too much about airplanes. Right. You ain't gonna talk about rocks too much, right? Like right. It's a reason all these things need their own context, because in the framing of the American project, there's different pieces of it that have to be extracted out. And the level of intentionality in what you put there should make everyone more American. Mm-hmm. Right? It should make everyone more American to engage in the complexities of the project. The challenge is we frame the project as a good project with some missteps, or some people frame it as a fundamentally bad project with some bright spots, right? Like, so we're choosing either of those projects, we're choosing either of those perspectives versus it's complex. As I've started to research a lot of like French history, I was listening to Ta-Nehisi Coates, and he was talking about how he was studying like the French revolutions and French history. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And one of the things that, you do when you get there is you start recognizing, yes, the French perspective on slavery, the French perspective on other countries, how they did colonialism, all those things are very unique. So it looks different, right? Even down to the way Louisiana in its centrality in like American history looks different than a lot of other places. Mm-hmm. So you just have to engage in nuance. And as we'll continue to go deeper into this conversation, people don't like nuance, but nuance is where the jewel is found, so to speak. Nuance is where the understanding is born, right? And so not having a museum or taking things out of a museum that you disagree with is tantamount to not giving people the full range of experience to know what an American is.
Yeah. And the the thing I appreciated about, and like literally, and I want to be fair because, I haven't always agreed with some of his perspectives, right? And then when he got to the part, it was like, speaking to, which was a really interesting thing I learned when I actually was doing my own undergraduate on history. It was that there's history, and then there's like the study of how we study history, right? And it's an important part of actually learning how to study history so that you can analyze the context and the ideas in people's works that you're going to read, maybe to cite for your own study, right? So if you're going to go study something and you go read a couple different perspectives on, let's say you want to study. I'm gonna pull it back. You want to study farm labor, right? And so then in the history of farm labor in the U.S., post in the industrial age or after the turn of the century, right? So then you got to talk about sharecropping. You got to talk about industrialization and mechanicalization. There's all these other, but somewhere in there, then you're going to have to get into like, okay, well, sharecropping, and how does sharecropping relate to trying to keep, Black folks specifically as labor that were already on the land, but then also realizing that there wasn't enough, and that other folks were either intentionally brought in to do labor, right, on the land. Right. So Chinese, Japanese migrants, again, Mexican migrants, but even some of them were not always just from Mexico. That's what I mean. Right. Any group of folks, like it's all these other complexities. And then if you're reading old books to get a like sense, well, what were they saying at the time, or what is this date? Like you got to compare all these different types of data. It gets into a place where you learn to like to try to understand something and understand a phenomena. If you have too many perceptual blinders that are just right in the forefront of how you access it, you're going to miss the actual story. You're going to miss the details, right? And the thing that my own impression of the museum is that the lower floor is dedicated to trying to give a fair assessment of what our experience is in the U.S. and like I think in the text agreed, but then the other levels get into all this other complicated stuff about us. That's about us. That's not necessarily centered in our relationship with white folks or racism or structural challenge. That the roles and the way that we just show up in the world. And it's, I have a couple, operating justice notions that I think about that maybe cloud folks' comfortability engaging with like, yeah, so how does, AG, not AG Stewart.
AG Gaston,
selling insurance to Black folks. And become one of the wealthiest and economically most powerful men in Alabama, enough so that he can provide some level of protection and stability for the civil rights movement due to his wealth and access, right? And that there's other Black folks, and then you can get into like maybe a more strong leftist lens, like, well, he's a bourgeois. I don't remember the dang categories. He's a bourgeois Scooby Bobbity Boo, and then you can get into this like super conservative thing, like he's just a businessman, but then there's another thing like he's a person, and like there's like part of the reason some of his autobiography or biographies written because his grandkids wanted to make sure people didn't forget who he was. Like it when you I got a couple different really good books about wealthy Black folks from the Civil War era and other and it's something that we do need to understand about those. You got to understand the differentiation, which he goes into good, I think, of the Booker T, W.B. Du Bois conversation, and the criticism that, and it's something I think we definitely can learn in this age, and it's something I'm hoping we get better at, that like you may be your perspective on a current issue may be correct or a good one, but it may not be as absolute and clear as you think it is for other people to align with that idea, whatever that idea is, right? There's something about like how our internal community politics again around how you show up economically, what type of religion you practice, how you talk, what part of the country you're from, right? As a Black person, like that's really complicated and nuanced, and I say beautiful. Like when we learn, like growing up, we grew up in Delaware Valley. You in Philly, me on the other side of the river. So as though I have an affinity and understand of a lot of things Philly. I am not from Philadelphia, and I am very clear with people. That, oh, you like from Philly? I'm like, no, I'm from New Jersey. Because culturally, it's inappropriate for me to act like I'm from 52nd and Diamond or 52nd
Right.
2nd Street or North Philly or whatever. Because I know there is specific. One, I'm just not from over there, and that's a good way to get into a fight. It tells me you from somewhere you ain't from growing up. But
there's also the uniqueness. I want to say there's a uniqueness of what does it mean when we heard the same stuff on the radio, but it meant fundamentally different things to us.
Right.
Because we would hear the same things on the radio, and when they always talk about, and there's going to be a party at the War Memorial, Trenton, New Jersey. I was like, where the hell is this War Memorial?
I know exactly where the War Memorial is.
But that's what I'm saying. So even in you centering it as a Philadelphia radio station. It's a Philadelphia, New Jersey, Delaware station.
Yeah. And
people are hearing it. And yes, people in New Jersey are having a unique experience to what they're hearing differently than what, and that's the uniqueness of the Black experience. And this is going to be the one time a year that I go on my rant and talk about how I don't like Juneteenth. And I'm going to tell you why I don't like Juneteenth. I'm going to do this one time a year. And it's like the most unpopular shit that I ever say to anybody. Because everyone's like, oh, it's Juneteenth. Come on, Jesse. They're being too rough. It's Juneteenth. Come on, man. It's when we all got free. And I argue it's not when we all got free, right? It's when a particular set of things in a very unique project like Texas, and why Texas was Texas, people got free. And it deserves to be celebrated for that.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean that's when everybody got free. Because guess what? Some folks in Jersey got free after Texas.
Yep.
Right? And so there's a uniqueness there. But when we try to jam all the history in without nuance, we create a situation where it's all or nothing. And then someone else comes from a whole nother perspective with another all or nothing perspective. So as a result, we end up getting a non-nuanced view of our state and history.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I always like when Killer Mike talks about Atlanta, and he says that in Atlanta, Black folks are the villain and hero.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, because whatever's happening, somebody Black was up, down, left, right. It was somebody Black doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Or somebody Black was connected to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's true centering a knowledge of self, if you will. What is your complicity and what is your role in everything?
Yeah.
And I think the museum does a great job, and it was really good for McWhorter to be able to tell the story and say, listen, I have my own concerns with this, but this is an important part of the American project.
Yeah.
And you need conservatives, you need all people talking about it's an important part of the American project, not because you feel like you got a pat on the back per se, but because your history is central to American history and global history.
Yeah. Mm.
And I know we'll talk a little bit about when that goes wrong here. So,
oh yeah, and it's so challenging for me that we have this urge to like run to a position or perspective, and to me that's like learning that like that's something that you don't realize that you've. A structural, I say, justice armchair academic says, is like a Western notion. Like I have to reassert who I am within this context because intellectually I got to pick a side and I'm like, you just exist. Like you are, you're not, you are, you are not. I am not. Like I am. So therefore, we start talking about it. Is as I've brought up. I think I brought it up on this space. But being in a room as a person that's on a school board and someone being critical of public schools or schools in any general sense, and then kind of look at me like, yeah, sorry, Justice. And I'm like, you ain't say nothing about me. Like I didn't make, I'm not hurt by you voicing something that you feel negative about an experience that happened to you.
Right.
You don't have to defend. I'm good. Right. But the exploration, if you interrogated why you feel like you need to do that. right? Have you looked at like, why do I feel like I need to tell you, oh, sorry, whatever random person that's on the dais at the moment. But then getting into when you look at like I've said to people, and I think I've recorded many years ago thinking about this in my annual thing on Black History Month specifically, that like something that we created for us. We didn't tell nobody, we didn't tell other people they couldn't come, but we didn't invite you. Like y'all decided to adopt this engagement, but this was something our communities were doing for us because we needed to take control of our own community, learning about ourselves, right? Juneteenth, I have a similar, I was still struggling with it, right? Where I'm like, to me, that was something real specific to my people, my folks who I got to know, or who either were from Texas or had family in Texas, or that was an aspect of their Black experience that they were inviting me into as a Black person who grew up in the Delaware Valley, who's from Trenton. You know what I'm saying? Like, yes, I know I actually have a good mapping of my least recent Black descendancy as pertains to West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania border, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and maybe a little bit of Tennessee in there. Like, them's where I know my people come from. I don't have a judgment or a feeling about it, but I know it's different than folks that's from Texas. It's different. And that's dope. So I don't know if I want to, and then also deal with the complexity of that a sister from Texas wanted to make sure that fought so hard to make sure it was acknowledged and seen. Like both of these ideas can exist for us. And I wonder, again, this feeling that you have to resolve some prime central theme, right? That then undermines our ability to keep studying and learning and keep being curious. And I really appreciated the thing about the museum and then the potentiality, right, of the museum existing in those other floors. Because like when I go, I only go to the upper floors. I don't go to the lower floors. I go to the upper floors. I go pocket in. I go sit. Sometimes go take my own book with me and chill in there and just be in there and around all this. The one thing I will say, just because I've gone so many times and something I have to remember about the National Ball and the Smithsonian as a whole, most people don't go often. Unless therefore where I'll be like, man, they need to update this. We need some new stuff. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, slow down, Justin. Like, just because you've had the privilege to get to pull up to the bumper, maybe other people may have not. So therefore, them going to seeing the like section that got all like the blues and the jazz musicians. They only may have had one trip in the last 8 years when they've been able. This may be their only trip to ever come to DC and see this. So it's like, you gotta acknowledge your positionality in learning something, and even again, I would think someone like him would have went to the museum. So him in 2025 be like, I went to the museum for the first time. This 10 years in, 8 years in, it's sort of like, oh, okay. I didn't think about that. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's so I put the link. I encourage folks to read it. I encourage folks to think about how you study history, especially in this moment where we are dealing with such a high level of which, I'm going to transition us to a couple other goofy things that are happening. But we've said, like, where folks want to be knowledgeable about stuff, but not actually, they want to be fully ahistorical or not grounded in truth or facts. They want to be grounded in like, well, this is how I think about it. This is how I feel about it. And I was like, that's cool how you feel, but you wrong.
Right.
And then I'm, I ain't gonna act like you right when you're wrong.
Right.
So yeah, you got anything else on that for?
No, I think that's a good transition into some of the goofy.
So let's go we'll go to goofy because I want
to go goofy shit. You want to go to Jawanza Kunjufu? I think let's shift out and then talk about where it went haywire.
So the goofy and then Jawanza, or go to
Jawanza.
All right, yeah, because I think it's important. So Jawanza Kunjufu passed away in the last 2 weeks since the last time we recorded. And to me, like, he represents was a part of a whole generation of like Black sort of scholars / academics / educators, writers that were trying to embrace again this sort of like the very discrete, specific like reality of making sure Black children learn and the learning conditions under Black children existed, how Black families educated their children. It was and not that he was a prime or the center. Like I put him in the same space of from folks who were like academics and educators, maybe like that were published in this other sort of thing, but a whole generation of Black educators, that were lettered, but then were practitioners, were running schools or running after school programs based on with these intentions around, in this notion that, especially in our current moment of everyone's concerned with literacy, like who were a part of the well-being and liberation of Black folks, was also like, yeah, we need to help Black folks teach their kids to read. We need to help Black folks make sure their kids are getting the most out of their education. We need to be like acknowledge that, there's a system that is intentionally not doing well for Black children. You can go in there with Dr. Amos Wilson, with is it Maxwell? I'm trying to remember some of the sisters. There's so many people. I don't have all my books out, if anyone can see back here, so I can't remember everyone's name.
Right.
I think about somebody supporting our lives, Miss Howes, and as I tell people this, I got an on-the-job training in child development. You know what I'm saying? Tutoring young children under her guidance, right? And telling us like, no, this is it. I was like, okay, all right, let me actualize these ideas about how we engage with supporting the confidence, self-esteem development, while also managing their rigor and their capacity and honoring their ability, and like all these things that you could take for granted if you didn't have access to it. You know what I'm saying? Right. There's stuff, I think it was the conspiracy to the miseducation, Destroy Black Boys. I think probably the book most folks like bubbles to the surface with Dr. Kunjufu, or Doctor? It was Doctor. Yep. Yeah. So, yeah, and he was a teacher at Temple. Was he at Temple, or was he just in the Temple?
No, he was out of Chicago. He went to Morgan. He was out of Chicago. The Malefic Sante.
Yeah, Malefic Sante
was out
of Temple. Okay. Yeah. So I just wanted to just give a moment of respect and praise for him specifically, but also I think it's germane to this history conversation. You know what I'm saying? Because we had an empowering, if you were fortunate to have access to, at the same time, the wild stuff that was happening in our world with crack and everything else, and the budding for current formation of like being ignorant, being like was in conflict, was in this direct challenge with, nah, man, you need to know what the hell you talking about. Like, even if you ain't involved in school, you still supposed to be knowledgeable. Like, nah, man, later for that. Like, we can't get where we want to. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts on Jawanza.
Yeah, man. I think it's directly connected to your first point, and then some of the resulting points. The through line is really important. Jawanza Kunjufu in my house was like, it was like he dropped like a mixtape. Like he would drop it and they'd be like, all right, we gotta get the book. They're go to Hakeem's and go get the book, which is another piece of the whole Black bookstore culture, which was a third space for us to actually assert literacy, right? A space for us to assert history, a space for us to assert our joy, a space for us to assert our ability to tell stories, right? Which has largely gone to the cloud, right? It has largely gone to like the stories we tell you, instead of it being a maybe 125-page book, it is now a 2.5-minute video. There's advantages to it, and I think there's some challenges to it because you don't keep it, right? It's like Spotify. Like I pay for it every month, but I don't keep it.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'm leasing it, like, because your access to the internet is only connected to your ability to get on. So even if you argue that something is free, it goes back to the whole tech thing. If it's free, you're on the menu, right? Like, but even if we say that you get on something and it's free to watch something, let's assume that still it's because you had the access to get on versus the access to buy a book. So I think the Black bookstore culture connecting to the Black history conversation becomes very important. But when he would drop, you would get the book, and like sometimes they just throw it in front of me, read it. And I'm like, damn, I am a black boy. Like, conspiracy there. Read it. Right? Like, you read it. And so, you know, in some ways you started learning all this kind of like really challenging information about what's happening to people. And you don't know where to put it because you're like, yo, is my man, is he being destroyed by white imperial system? Like, what's going on? Like,
is he under attack right now?
I'm 8. Like, I'm 8. How am I put this into consideration? Right? But he also, I think, was one of the first people to talk about something very interesting around to be popular or smart, right? In his book in '88, where he talked about that and gave examples of decreasing interest in scholarship, largely brought on by the post-industrial drug like economy. So when people started being able to make the decision, like, yo, am I going to do this with y'all with a book I don't want to read and a teacher who may not be responsive in a class in a building that is cold?
Right.
Or I can go outside, count to 10, and make a couple $100 a day.
Right. If I can maintain some rudimentary multiplication skills and some numbering concepts, I can go out here and get busy.
Numeracy and literacy, right? And so he was wanting to talk about that there was an emerging culture in the Black community that actually was saying that to be intelligent was to be white.
Yeah. And I should say, because we and I'm include us in it, like we as a community struggle when people in our community criticize us about us, because we get into the like, oh, other people can see us getting criticized, and I understand the notion, and then I also go, yeah, but we got to talk about it. You know what I'm saying? Like we have to have some sensitivity, and often I guess you would say the dissenting tone. Often when I go in my travels and it's, you know, brother, sister, whomever, is like, and we don't even want to talk about our lack of discipline, or we don't want to talk about, you know, and I remember in time sort of at least feeling like the subtext sometimes of people being, you know, and there was the aspects of, you know, we were dealing with this contextual folks that wasn't there, like the focus on boys being a lack of focus on girls at times, you know what I'm saying? At least in terms of criticism of him, you know what I mean? Right. And but also just the struggle of us trying to, again, develop these intellectual models, deal with the way we engage with scholarship and learning, deal with these structural challenging problems that are happening with us. You run up against all these different pressure points and touch subjects, and like, yeah, like of course of course it cares about the young women, but yeah, it may not show in the way that we want, or and then again, like I said, sometimes I don't remember how old I was when this stuff happened. Like, wait, I was 10. First time I saw something.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Like, I'm like, damn, I was, you know, and it is the one thing that I that juxtapose our current moment, and another time, hopefully we're going to get a moment to touch on this. Like, you know, these folks were having heavy conversations, and then they were like bringing us into them. And some of us was in them, and some of us was like, yeah, I'm going to go over here and play some basketball. I am going to actively walk away from this complicated stuff y'all talking about over there. And it struck me as well, like, again, the context that for some of these different writers and scholars who were populating the, you know, bookstores with information to try to help us. Right. Again, ultimately centering us. They were not centering the American thing, or like to get a job. And it was like, yo, you like, you know, I definitely think a class criticism of that could be like, they were doing, you know, this was mainly targeting like middle class, whatever type of Black folks who had the privilege to boo with the books. And yeah, but also why, I mean, it was a book. It wasn't like you couldn't read it unless you couldn't read it.
But it assumes, because I want to touch on that, because we get into that, this lumping proletarianism, like, and we, you know, and it shows up in a lot of our work today, right? It shows up in being like, find the kid with the biggest problems, right? Like, and everything is about that. Now, obviously, in many situations, these young men are in danger, and young women increasingly are in danger. So I want to honor that. But like, there's a range of a Black community. So when we engage in the class thing, we stop thinking that just because someone is not middle class or whatever that determines at that time, that their families don't read.
Right.
Or then we start to get into this really creepy shit about how people ain't got time to read. Right? Like, where do we get this idea that people don't have time to read? Yeah. Right? And this idea that, the poor or the lumpen proletariat are so helpless.
Right.
That they can't do the things that are about their own freedom, right, which we know not to be the case.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so we have to refute that actively, because a lot of times we're talking about agency, but then we take agency away from people because we're funding them.
Yeah.
We take people agency away from them because we feel bad for them because something happened in their lives. Yeah. Where you can be intentional about assisting and removing barriers without stripping agency. And if we're not careful, I mean, I've made the mistake in the past, right? So this is not like I've always had this figured out. I have made this mistake, and I see us continuing to make the mistake. So if you're putting it in a book that was $8 at a bookstore that was in your community, right? Mm-hmm. That's something different. It wasn't somewhere that I had to click 4 links and find it on the internet. No. It was actually simpler than going on to YouTube. Like, yeah, it's there. It's in the store.
It's right there.
Go there.
Go to the store and get
Go to the store. It's there, right? And again, what I'm saying, we got to be real. Our bookstores weren't just about like Malcolm X and Man-Child in the Promised Land. It was books. It was Iceberg Slim. It was, you know what I mean? It was all kind of stuff. Donald Goines. Because our experience is not just books about our problems.
Right. Our struggle is not our defining feature of life.
Right.
It's just a factor.
He was just really good. And I personally appreciated reading his books as I got to a certain age, because he started to tap on the underachiever in the role where children will subvert their intelligence in order to be an underachiever culturally. Mm-hmm. And what do you have to do to create environments where all children can feel like they don't have to subvert what they know?
Yeah.
In order to be okay with their broader kind of like, youth community.
Yeah.
And so I think one personal interaction I had with him, and he, I appreciate him checking me on this too, was when I was doing like Nifty, the National Foundation for Teaching Entrepreneurship. The founder, Steve Mariotti, mm-hmm. he would bring Jawanza Kunjufu to all the training things. So, just for folks who are listening, and we'll do a link. National Foundation for Teaching Entrepreneurship was a organization developed to like teach, frankly, Black and brown kids. Started in the Bronx, and then it went to a lot of different cities about like that. Black and brown kids had natural entrepreneurship skills that were not being cultivated. Mm-hmm. And so for people who learn to teach entrepreneurship, Steve Mariotti would bring in Jawanza Kunjufu, and he would talk about what were some of the barriers. And then one time I was in there, and I like warm Pepsi. So some shit going back to my childhood trauma. We don't drink Coke and Philly drink Pepsi. But anyway, yeah. And we were drinking, and I was drinking, and I was talking. Me and Dr. Kunjufu were having a conversation. And I was answering all of his questions, and probably what came across arrogant.
Yeah, I knew you that time. We both probably would have been real affirmed about what we think and how right.
Yeah, we're some arrogant. You got to tell the truth about yourself. And he was like, "Yeah, okay, the brother knows a lot. Well, I got that Pepsi with that acid tearing his system apart." He gave me some old real Black man.
Oh man, he hit you with real. Yeah, right too. That's the next one. He could tell you, you don't need all that salt, brother. You know what I'm saying? Like, listen, hit you with it. Oh man,
he gave it to me straight up, and I was like, right on. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's when our historians and our doctors left the academy and came to the community, and that's not to knock those who wrote and did not come to the community, because there's roles for everybody. So I'm not trying to say that like that makes him better. It makes it relevant to certain groups of people at certain times, right? Just like someone being in the academy and being an academy person and helping people through the academy is really important.
Yeah.
And so I just think like his passing is a moment for reflection about when we're writing books. Are we writing books based on research? Are we writing books or are we constantly opining and calling it knowledge?
Yeah. That's a good.
Right? Like I think a lot of people are constantly opining and calling it knowledge. And in some ways, it's become very anti-intellectual. Even the term would not be popular here. But sometimes when people get into I said what I said. Okay, so what you're telling me is we can't have a debate on what you said. So I should actually not just listen. Like it is actually some shit that has nothing to do with what I should take in because I can't ask you a question about it.
Right.
Now, of course, that does come from our cultural context where everything must be shown and proved. Yeah. However, like with the, when we get into a time where we're calling our opining and even our well-intentioned opining and maybe insightful opining knowledge, what we're doing is creating a situation where the next generation can't kind of continue with that perspective, right? And we need to be able to do that.
So, respect and love to Dr. Kunjufu and props to his family. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Thank you. You know what I mean? And at another time, like I said, these are things I put on the justice docket. Like, if I did go get a doctorate in history or something somewhere, like if I did a dissertation on all of those different writers and scholars of that age from like the late 70s to the early 90s, like there's probably some real interesting like stuff there if you like could lay some of that out and look at it, right? And
from
go,
Dr. William Joyce Wilson to Dr. Anderson at Penn to Malefi Asante to Dr. Naeem Akbar, forgetting the sister's name. I mean, obviously, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, Bell Hooks. Like, I think there's a very robust intellectual tradition that kind of met the moment, and I do think if we're not careful, we'll put that to the back and not give it the time that it deserves.
Yeah. And this takes us, this opens the door to the silly stuff. And it's two fronts. And so Dr. Lamont Hill, Marc Lamont Hill. Marc Lamont Hill. Philadelphia, you know what I'm saying?
We went to high school together too. High school same time.
You know what I'm saying? Another product of our Delaware Valley experience.
Absolutely.
Has joined the Joe Budden Podcast, and there was an interaction around the flat earth and some other things that happened on his show that was almost like like I said, I've watched a couple of clips and I've tried to watch some extended. I haven't been able to watch the whole episode. But basically these people are all around our age. So this is our generation's, like it was like almost the living embodiment of our generational reality that Dr. Kunjufu was talking about. Playing out live on stage. And I'm gonna bring in some of the conversation around the Diddy trial, not so much the substance that is also some of the content development that's out there around that of this like. Yeah, I think what I think, and therefore you got to kind of respect it. And then him kind of going like, but wait a minute, like, no, I'm not like wrong. Like, I know what the hell I'm talking about. Like, there's science, there's like reasonable reasons why the things. And watching it happen, it was sort of like to me, it was emblematic of this. Like, this is something we gotta we gotta fix so that the kids, and I'm just saying like little kids, but like those that are younger than us in their 20s and 30s don't think. Nah, I am anchored to whatever idea I've decided is right about the world for the rest of my days, and I can't go, I can't make a chart and then go, oh, so you mean to tell me I should actually, wash my towels every whatever many days based on the science, like, or I need to maybe I should not have a Pepsi every meal. Maybe I should have just some water sometimes. Like, they're like, we can't learn or advance beyond something that we think to be true, right? Or that if we have skepticism about something, that is the same thing as actually knowing what's wrong with it.
Right.
And yeah, I just wanted to get your thoughts. There's like all that interaction, and people went to like, oh, the barbershop, but like yo, I was looking at it, I'm like, are they serious? And props to him because he did most like what we would do when you stay on your ground. Like, look, I don't care if all 5 of y'all think some bullshit. This is bullshit. I don't believe that. I don't agree with that.
No, and that thing is like we talk about the barbershop, but again, going back to our grounding, how do we get grounded in relevant, rational data and information that then can take us to wisdom and understanding? Mm-hmm. I think, Dr. Hill is a public intellectual. I think he is much in the tradition that we're talking about. As a public intellectual, is publicly open to engage in ideas, publicly open to, opening his own bookstore up, Uncle Bobby's up Germantown Avenue, uptown. So it's like he is doing, I think, keeping the tradition of that work, and to be faced and to be talking to people who, I think where I see where people get this from is this like healthy suspicion, right? So I think a lot of people have a healthy suspicion of what they've been taught, right? And sometimes they have a healthy suspicion of what they've been taught because they learn later what they've been taught was a lie, right? But it's taken to a gross exaggeration that at some point is no more the same. Because now it's just no one's proved it to me.
Right.
Like you can't prove it. Like, no, they're the laws of science, physics, chemistry. No, we can prove it. There's not an ice wall like Game of Thrones. Right? Like that was what people thought in Game of Thrones, that there was an ice wall. There's no ice wall. You know what I mean? But again, a lot of times people now will show that they're intelligent by being like, but what if it's not though? But what if it's not? You know what I mean? And so we just saw the loss of intellectualism. And when you start debating some fundamental elements like that, the next question starts to be, well, what else are we debating? Like, if we're debating, like, could you walk off the planet?
Does the water go off like a waterfall?
Could you get to a point, there's like a border and it's just all space? To say nothing of the idea that, like, if you got that close to space, you have a bigger problem. Like that blackness that you see when you're watching television, if you got that close, it's over. You can't breathe. So, and I think it was good, and people have debated, well, why would he even come on there? And it's like, well, hundreds of thousands of people watch this shit.
Yeah.
So it is good to have someone who's not that shit crazy.
Yeah.
On a show.
And I also have a husband. Like, those are his peers. Those, like I said, those are our peers. Those are people our age. These are people like, and for him, in terms of someone who's been in media for several decades now, they're in media. Like, Joe Budden was a rapper who had that one song that's real dope and a bunch of mixtapes that people liked. And then he parlayed that in, like a lot of things. Sometimes if you can rap, you got the personality. You can do other stuff. You know what I'm saying? Right. You get out here, you can kick it some other ways. And it is a largely entertaining show, and it represents, like, but we're in the same community, right? So so contrary to popular belief, where people will be like, well, you probably don't hang out with people like this, Justice, or you, but Justice, it's like, you may not know who I hang out with.
Right.
I may be with any number of people, and those people are not without merit for who they are.
Exactly.
This notion that you think are the people that matter versus the people that don't matter is, why do you think that's the truth? Who told you that you get to decide what, and I'm first want to tell you that some people are not serious people, right? Like, you're not a serious person. I love you, but also, I want you to keep your opinions on that topic to yourself. Like, save that for when me and you talking. Don't you go on the internet. Don't you be out here on Beyonce's internet, you know what I'm saying, talking that talk. You know what I mean? And and so I say that in jest, but when you get to the root of it, this is my people. Like, some people who you may consider much more, intellectually effete or important or whatever. Effete might not be the right word, but like elite or whatever. That's what I was going for. Yeah, and might be with them, be like, yeah, you know a lot about that topic, but everything else, you a straight fool.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But that's still these are people. This is us. We on Earth together. Like, it's not some other place we at. So if you go in any room, this again, this notion around like, well, like, you know, and I know because we're in this moment where we are side party to a structural battle over whose intellectual supremacy gets to be the ruling sort of normalizer, right? External from us inside the American project. That then it trickles down to us this certain ideas, and it's something that again is not totally new, but like, yeah, like, oh, these people got these kind of degrees and other stuff, so they're like maybe more serious or more important Black folks, and these other folks that got this other kind of perspectives or position within something, they're you know, these kind of they're like working class, and these people are like middle class, or these people are like, you know, everyone's favorite thing now, like my hood family and my suburban family, which I how I feel about that foolishness. Damn neighborhoods.
I never heard that. What's that?
Well, it's just basically people call places, people use the word suburb and hood as code for poverty and where Black people live. That Black people live in hoods and not Black people live in suburbs. And then I would look at, but these buildings is all the same. The only thing that's different in these two places physically, right? Y'all not talking about like some structural analysis of the location from a central city to a not central city. It's like, no, you're actually talking about where people are poor, where people are perceived to be more middle or upper class. Stop saying this foolishness, or the clear delineation of, as I like to say, the assumption that the family that is more economically stable is not shot out, and that the family that is more economically perilous circumstances are more shot out. Where my experience is there's a mixed balance of shot outness, and you really can't tell until you hang out with people. And it's unhealthy.
It takes away this huge part of any community, which is working class. Mm-hmm. Like, some people live in proximity to communities that you may consider hoods, and they're working class, and maybe they're doing a little better than everyone else. Maybe somebody else has moved into the suburbs and it's a little tighter, right? Because they're working class. I think Black folks have gotten that out of our dialogue, where the political framework is about working class, whatever that means to who you're talking to. Mm-hmm. I think the Republican Party has used the idea of working class like in a genius way, of like the working class. So sometimes we'd be like, yeah, you know, everybody in the hood or everybody in the suburbs, where, you know, and increasingly in a lot of areas across the country, we all know about the role of first and sometimes second ring suburbs, and that they come with their own sets of challenges, right? And we know that some cities have gentrification. You know, that's everybody's favorite thing when they see something because they don't drink coffee. It's gentrified. I'm gonna tell you that too. Every time somebody see grass or green shit, everybody say, "Oh, it's gentrified." Right? Because you forgot that your grandmother had a garden in the back of her house. So now every time you see something green, it's gentrified, or that actually coffee beans came from Ethiopia. Moron. Like, you know what I mean? Like, like, you know what I'm saying? But again, in that different Black people have had different class perspectives, right? For a long time.
Oh yeah,
not just now.
Yeah, and complicated, challenging class perspective. Like it's in there, and all of the various different. It in itself is a studyable, trackable, documentable through. I don't know, documentable. I just made it.
I like that though. That was cool.
You know what I'm saying? Documentable. I just came
like
up
complected. With that. I didn't know that was a term.
Bang. You know what I'm saying? We out here.
It was in the dictionary. So documentable. Right,
yeah, I mean, documentable. Like reality of like, you know, subtext in this poem is, you know, Langston Hughes throwing a stone at this, or Zora Hurston whole piece going like, hey man, y'all be acting like because people speak English a certain way that they not smart. Like them and really being like, nah, don't assume because how they talk that you think that they're not intelligent. Like this stuff is all in the mix in our thing. Right. And
I mean, W.E. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, right?
Yeah. Like, it's right at the core of it. And it's an important thing for us to make sure we think about, so we don't be saying dumb stuff to each other right now. Which ends up being, you know, some people will go, oh, Marc Lamont Hill with his experience and accolades, he shouldn't be with them brothers, right? And it's like, no, it's a good chance. Like that's, you know what I mean? Like
Like
we
you
hang
said,
out
that's
with
your
everybody.
peer.
That's
Your
your
peer.
peer.
It reflects the community you're talking to. It reflects the goal of a public intellectual. And that's always a good thing, right? Like, because it now, again, to my point, let's say it was just craziness on the show. We would say, we ain't doing nothing but showing us negativity.
Yeah.
So them being on, and yes, they're having conversations, and Ish and them, they don't think enough. Or they use, like, again, old framing, like they wanted us to be like that, right? Like, I don't know if you've seen the piece where they talk about, like, getting the father out of a home.
Oh yeah, everybody.
And like
everybody loves they got to get the fathers out, and then they had
like who was they, right? And I think Marc Lamont Hill just appropriately asked, who was they? Like, there's absolutely some people who probably had a nefarious, insidious idea, but did it become the systemic context about getting a father out of the home? Or how much was that impacted by post-industrial America, where, you know, a lot of people who had jobs didn't have a job.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, why the system creates who has to be there and aid to families, that's a different conversation that we can be more nuanced about. But when we're not nuanced about it, we can downplay post-industrial America and give it all to the government. Because we can stop talking about, like, for example, my grandmother worked in a hat factory. She worked at Stetson hats, right? Mm-hmm. And then she went to become a nurse. Why? Because Stetson hats went out of business. Or pardon me, they left, they moved. Mm-hmm. So she had to shift. My grandfather always was working at moving furniture, because, again, there was an industrial manufacturing structure. And then all of a sudden it wasn't.
Yep.
So instead of us having that dialogue, which directly connects to what I would call democratization of the drug trade, right? Where there was a time where, like, real hustlers had to be part of the drug trade. And then it got to a point where we're like, hey, everyone can be part of the drug trade. Like, this is going to say something crazy about this, but it's okay. Like, crack was like if you mastered how to sell drugs. Like, because it's like, hey, we're going to put it and sell it to you for $1, $2, and $5, $10. Like,
it definitely was a hyper mark, like, structuralization of it. Like, yo, it's so many entry points that you can afford to get some of this poison up in you.
Yo, it was like,
and it works fast.
It was like Apple. It was like Apple Music, like the iPod. Like, hey, you want to buy a song? $1.
It's only $1, like, 99 cents. It's yours.
Like, damn, everybody can buy it. You know what I mean?
And so this forever.
We downplay the role that played, and we just go to government without most people never reading Moynihan's work, the commissions, like the Moynihan Commission,
right, and then and the critique of the Moynihan Commission, and the debate and discussion of what it was saying, and like and understanding, and this circles back to, like, the early start in the discussion, like understanding a phenomena. You know, it's something that has happened or is going on does not necessarily mean you know why it's going on, or you have to keep looking at it and move around it, and you ask yourself questions, and you go like, well, you know, so yes, I get it. Yeah, you know, later when they did the welfare and the fathers had to leave the house, and then I'm like, but also, you know, within the traditional model that y'all all say we all need to do around, like, what the man is supposed to do in the house, primarily he was supposed to, like, bring money and, like, make sure all the stuff was going on. And then guess what? It was totally constructionally permissible for him to not really be around or emotionally available to anybody. So the father you're talking about is not the father that you think you're talking about.
That's what
the father who was nurturing and is like out back. Like, remember that one time we went to CD. And he was in DD was in Williamsburg, and I think it was a Jewish family, Siddiq family, and like one of the elders or the pops, somebody, and he was like, I looked out the window, and they was outside with the book, and they was like, he was giving them the teachings, right, and seeing that, like, as a father teaching his children, right. That is not necessarily what was the American model in this again perceived glory age of the 40s, 50s of the working man, and it was like the lights is on, the food is in the thing. Woman pour me a drink. and I'm going down to the Ahu, the what's the name lodge, to the Elks Lodge to go talk to other men and be in the Congress of Men. And I might be back later tonight, and you better be ready for me when I get here, woman. You know what I mean? Wink, wink. Like, yo, we be full of falsehood, arguing, telling people, oh yeah, they got you good. And then, and this is one of the real challenging things. This is a men's moment for everybody. Y'all keep listening, but I'm talking to men. Sometimes the amount of times that I engage with my own peers, and we will be talking about how logical we are, and the man being in the house, so we gonna make sure that we use order, while fully ignoring factual experience that's happening to you in real time. So going, with people, some folks, I have the direct experience with my grandfather, which is not necessarily to say, not say that he was like a mean old man before in life, but of him being a nurturer to me, making me cream of wheat, feeding me. When I was sick and my mom couldn't go to work, had nowhere else to take us, we could stay at his house. Also, Pop did not suffer fools. And if you was in a jam, he was gonna help you out, but you couldn't stay too long. You know what I'm saying? He was gonna be real clear about that. Like, hey, you can't snooze, my man, but I got you for a night or two. Then you're gonna have to get out there and get it yourself, right? Like these notions, like, and to me, it's the important part of the self, real, like now the self and studying the world and really looking at it and the things that all these different scholars and teachers have tried to talk to us about, and especially about our people, is that our notions of how we deal with each other are not rooted in some of the things that the staid American Western model says are the defined nature of the gender roles and these other things. And then when you get to this comfortability with like, well, the government wanted this, like, yeah, it's fun to say this or that, or yes, you may be technically correct if like at one point a government official was involved. But when you get into the weeds on what actually is happening with people, you got to start asking more detailed questions, because you can't actually effectuate change with, well, once upon a time, everybody wasn't fully dependent on welfare in the 60s, contrary to popular belief. Like probably a lot less of people did. Maybe, again, maybe that was your family experience, but everybody wasn't necessarily just like, somebody could pull out the data for me and prove Justice wrong. But I'll take a swing and say, I doubt the percentage of folks whose households were actually dependent primarily on welfare for sustenance that actually had the experience of, again, not saying along the way, but from where it started. They're like, yeah, I got to leave the house, woman, so that we can get these benefits. Like this notion, it's just like, yeah, like I dig it. And it was a rule, and it was an intentionally insidious rule to try to force that on and like look and see whose shoes was by the front door and all the type of shit with social workers. Like, yeah, that shit really happened. Also, there was a whole lot of other people who were just working class doing this, trying to figure it out, and that was not subject to this particular notion. But as the second verse in The Prisoner, like, we got to figure out why, to ask, why my daddy run? Like, what's going on with him that he be running? And that is about them, but that's about some other complicated, challenging shit. Right. And it frustrates me to no end to be like, oh, well, we just, they got the family out the house. I'm like, yo, why were you so easy to get out the damn house? They're my kids. I wish you would tell me I ain't going to see them. And that's what I come from.
Well, and it also plays into like, do we assume, and this is a thing that we've had, I think in a positive way, people have come to recently, do you assume because a man, because he may not live with his children, that he is not a fully participatory parent? Right. And I think because that doesn't mean that, because he doesn't live there, right, that he is not a fully participatory parent. Yep. You can argue the benefits, and there are research that talks about the whole host of benefits that exist when there is a just broad structure of family and there's two incomes, if for nothing else but the economics of it, frankly, right? Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that person isn't a parent. So again, like, we're often having conversations that are not really placed properly in the intellectual context.
Yeah.
But we're having them and it ends up in what starts to look like anti-intellectualism, right? It starts to, and it's kind of very similar to the election and conversations around the election. Like we start to, so it's easy for people to put stuff out there and say a person who father was from Jamaica and identified as a black man from Jamaica wasn't black. And he was, and it's true, and you can see him, and it's fair. And it's also fair that Vice President Harris and her sister were raised in South Berkeley amongst black women that added to their identity of blackness. Mm-hmm. Right? Like that's not debatable. But when you be like, ooh, but what if it's not? But what if what if they told you something?
What if they actually were in?
You know what I mean? And so I just like that's the the forever barbershop challenge. And when the barbershop gets on television,
yeah,
right. And again, I think it's we're not trying to frame this as like it only has to be one way, right? Like we can watch a lot of stuff and take what we want from it, but what we do have to do is stay in the tradition of our academy, the academy, our academy, and then even people who are thoughtful around challenging long-standing ideas.
Yeah.
For the benefit of the collective.
Yeah. And I say, I think it's good for media, for the culture, as media culture at the moment.
The culture.
That these things are being said in other spaces just uncontested and then going further and vice versa, right? Like it's okay to put, I'm all right with being pushed back on something that I might think is sacrosanct. I'm like, oh yeah, or that's another way they're just using words with mad syllables. Something that is settled, right? And as opposed to something that's like, nah, there's still some space to go, like maybe not, brother. And it's okay for folks to see that. Yeah, sometimes when folks say something, well, I think that, because if you got everybody should have web toes or something, whatever, something I'm trying to think of something nonsensical. And it's like, well, I mean, have you looked at your own toes recently? Like, do any of your family got web toes? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay for that challenge for them to have that moment on that platform because especially way these content algorithms work on these platforms that we may be engaging. It's going to send you, if you are a person, if you click on 2 flat earth videos, you're going to start getting recommended a whole bunch more of them. And so, that may be well done or sophisticated enough that you might be like, oh, this could really be, it might be on something here. Let me see what I see. And then, there's obviously going to be some other things in those videos. And then if somewhere in there, even just seeing them like, oh, he actually kind of pushed back about it from just a like way physics works. And like, we look in space and we see other things are spheres. So it's reasonable to assume you're on one too.
Right.
like why would all the other ones be spheres, but we're not spheres? And like these very, like, you don't got to go off into the, like, again, and if something is, so yes, I would stop there with that and just say, like, it's all right to have the collar. It is just frustrating to me, again, that like, I don't feel like I should have to defend Dr. Marc Lamont Hill because he's going like, yo, y'all bugging. I love y'all, and I'm on this show with you. You're bugging though.
Right.
Like y'all tripping.
Both things can be true. I can love you and you can be bugging. And that's the rigor that we need to show up with each other with. And I think the museum, Dr. Kunjufu, amongst others, again, as you shared, that Dr. Kunjufu, amongst others, brought to us, and how are we talking to each other today? And especially, I'm going to say this, how we're talking to each other based on how we're responding to how we feel. Mm-hmm. So if somebody's like, Black people are still marching, it's just for joy because we got fans. Now, I'm sure there's people going to listen and I'm going to get responses. Why you always mad at the damn fans? I'm actually not mad at the fans. I'm not mad at the fans. I'm mad at Zydeco dancing. I'm not mad at break dancing. I'm not mad at whatever dancing that you want to beat your feet in DC, house dancing in Chicago and Baltimore. dance. I stop at a 2-step, but that's my thing.
Yeah.
My thing is when we say what we're doing for joy, in this sense, is actually resistance when things are happening to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Like the same stuff is happening, taking your history, taking Medicaid. Who thinks that Black folks are going to go unscathed from when Medicaid gets scalped? Who thinks when these teacher programs, going back to the whole conversation about schools, when you don't give, the Department of Education is only giving grants for teachers to learn the distinct, unique students they're teaching? Who do you think hurts? And so when your answer to that is
making that sound with the fan,
is that this is an example? No, Black folks have been enjoying themselves and struggling against stuff forever.
Yep.
Right. And when we think we some sort of new Black folks, that like we ain't got to struggle no more because we got fans. So that's why, for everyone who's listening, I want to say something to me about fans. That's why people like where them fans at. Listen, shout out to the South.
Yeah.
Shout out to everybody. Because again, it's tradition. Going back to the same conversation we were having about like Juneteenth. They're distinct, unique traditions. And when we take traditions and don't give context, we're doing some of the same stuff even other cultures do to Black folks.
That's right.
But besides that.
No, thank you. And just, I'll add on to say, shout out to what's happening with that. You know what I mean? And the energy in terms of a particularly like a revival of sorts, you know what I'm saying? Of Southern centered, Black Blackness that is not necessarily hip hop, because we've had this over the last 20 years, and the South won, like all that kind of stuff with the hip hop. But it's like it's a contest that's not hip hop. That's these other things that are about the way Black folks, and especially in the place where Black folks are in the largest population, like from a plurality, and my own sister, like I'm learning how much. So our brothers and sisters from the South don't feel like they get to be a part of the Black mainstream narrative as it referring, to certain, context, or they have to leave some of that behind. Kind of germane to what we even talking about with that intellectualism. Like, oh, if I'm from Georgia and I go to, whoop-de-whoop school and get, whatever degrees, I got to be a different way than the way that I'm from. You know what I'm saying? Which, we may have our own context for that, but it can be something that we might miss that you felt that way. Because I didn't treat you like that, or I maybe didn't intend to, but then you've been experiencing that, and that's something that we gotta work on with us. And I had a couple of things on homie, but we gonna say that for another day, because we in a righteous, beautiful place. My only other closing thought I'll say to folks is, man, go study and read some of these works. Like there's a lot of stuff that some of our forebears worked really hard to break through structures or be so dynamic in their capacity that by their own rules they couldn't hide them. They just would then try to undermine where they landed in the canon, so to speak, or in the public dialogue. But Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu's work is worth the read, and it's worth the read in the context of other of the Black scholarly tradition of Black folks trying to help us at the center of education, and then by practice also trying to tell the rest of education how to be better at education. So, and shout out to John McWhorter. I might even write the brother email like, you know what, you don't know me, you know what I'm saying, but brother, I just want to let you give you a salute, man. Like you might be all right.
It was well done.
I appreciate that. So, anything else for you?
That's a good order. The order's good.
So with that, let's say peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to Good Brothers. Thank you to my good brother, Majestic. Good Brothers is a part of the Ask Your Oldhead podcast. These Good Brothers is our journey. You can support the podcast by liking, subscribing, rating, sharing, all the things. You can search Justice Rajee on Patreon and become a patron. You can go to askyouroldhead.com and buy a sweatshirt. You could also just, just listen and tell somebody else that you listen, that you like it. More to come, and just staying above water. I appreciate you. Be safe. Peace.